Hello again, I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Thank you for joining me again today for Ask the Candidate. Our privilege today to have the Lieutenant Governor in the Enid Television Network studios today, Todd Lamb. Todd, it's good to see you again.
Hey,
Thank
Steve.
you for spending time with us today.
Great to be back. It's great to be back in studio. I've been here a time or two, as you know.
Yes, you have. Well, we want to talk about the governor's race today, and so thank you for joining us on Ask the Candidate. So we've got 10, 11 questions, so here we go.
Great, I'm ready.
First one, session had completed, and you just kind of heard this back and forth conversation between parties and just within the murmurings that was going on inside the Capitol. So as governor, what would be your plan, or what would be your catalyst to get everybody basically on the same page and really to work together?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and how to get everybody on the same page. It comes to probably experience, life experience, leadership capabilities. But the plan is this. The plan is important, Steve. We've talked before on programs here, and you and I visited. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people know my background as a former Secret Service agent. When I was in the Secret Service, my supervisors never slid a gun across the conference table in my direction, said, hey, catch this gun and why don't you head on over to Paris or Guatemala, and the president's going to be there, do what you can. No, in the Secret Service, in my background, it was required to have detailed planning and backup planning. So my plan as the next governor of Oklahoma, and this plan that I've shared all across Oklahoma, is to renew our state. Renew is a 5-letter word, R-E-N-E-W, but that serves as a framework for my plan. Now, I know we're getting into details, but let me just give the 30,000-foot view. R-E-N-E-W. R, reform and restructure the budget process. It's antiquated, does not serve the people well, does not appropriate the tax dollar well at all. E stands for education. I'm for education funding, but with reform, it's got to have serious reform, fiscal reform, rigor reform. N stands for neighborhoods. Again, we've talked about this many times. A lot of folks know that I go to all 77 counties every year. And the reason I go to 77 counties for years, I've viewed my office not just at the state capitol, but in 77 counties sprinkled all across Oklahoma. My office has been in schools, farms, ranches, small businesses all across our state. The second E in my agenda of renew stands for economic diversification. We've got to diversify our economy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today. And the W just stands for work. The state government, to your point, this past session personified, it does not work well. When I'm governor, the state government will work more efficiently, serve the taxpayer better. W also stands for workforce development. So how do you bring people together? I've got a unique background. I talked about Secret Service. When I was in the state Senate, I just got 6 years of legislative experience, but that's significant. There's no rocket science at the state capitol. There aren't launching rockets there, but there are enough nuances and complexities, either with the budget or other policy initiatives. You've got to understand the process a little bit, and I do understand the process of legislative action. I'll be the first governor, and this answers your question even more directly. I'll be the first governor in state history, if I'm elected by the people, first governor in state history that ever served in the legislature in the minority and the majority. So that directly answers your question. How do you bring everybody together? Well, when I was majority floor leader, the COO of the state Senate, I work with Democrats and Republicans. I know what it is to be in the minority, I know what it is to be in the majority, and bringing all sides together. And I've got the most comprehensive plan to bring 149 legislators to the table to work and craft a detailed budget to save money and to serve the people of Oklahoma.
Let's take your RENEW acronym just a step further. And you touched on the phrase economic development, which leads to my second question. As governor, what would you do specifically to draw more Fortune 100, more Fortune 500 companies to, say, relocate or establish themselves here in Oklahoma?
Well, folks will always talk about incentives and how important incentives are.
Right.
Before we get to incentives, the ultimate public positive incentive is sound public policy. So here's what Oklahoma has done in recent history. Kind of 2000 going forward, Oklahoma finally passed right to work, state question. In 2007, which I was a part of, Oklahoma passed what we called at the time Texas Plus lawsuit reform. So we went from being a very litigious state from a less litigious state. So parenthetically, the statement is, hey, businesses, expand in Oklahoma or relocate in Oklahoma, and we won't sue you like crazy. We reformed it like the Texas model, we call it the Texas Plus. And then 2013, we talked about this on your program. Oklahoma finally passed comprehensive, sweeping workers' compensation reform. Oklahoma had only one of two states that had a very adversarial workers' comp system. It was Oklahoma and Tennessee, and Oklahoma's was much more adversarial than the state of Tennessee. So we passed workers' comp reform. So how do you get Fortune 500 companies to come to Oklahoma to relocate? Sound public policy. But something else you must have: experience in economic development. And I have that in the private sector. A lot of people don't know that, but I worked as an executive in a land brokerage firm for oil and gas. I'm a former petroleum landman, but also was an executive in a wireless telecom company. I've negotiated major business deals with major telecom companies, oil and gas companies. So I have that experience to negotiate and to bring people to the table, and I'll do that as governor. And I've got a real plan to diversify our Oklahoma's economy with export and trade.
We're fresh off a rather interesting, I'll just say interesting, let you interpret interesting however you want to, legislative session.
Well, that's about the most positive spin I've heard on the session
So
yet. Interesting. All right, go.
We'll go with interesting. But there seemed to be a lot of conversation about consolidating some agencies. There was waste in agencies. Well, maybe we should take these 3, make them 1, these 5, make it 2. As governor, what are your thoughts? What are your plan, if you will, in regard to agencies? Is consolidation the answer?
Well, it might be the answer, but even before we get to that question, the question has to be asked: how do we get there to have that discussion on which agencies, departments should be possibly consolidated or even possibly eliminated if it's not serving the taxpayer well? So in my plan to restructure the budget without getting in all the details, you've heard a lot of the details recently. Presently, 5 legislators negotiate the budget for 3.5 months, 2 weeks to go. The door opens up, light shines on that budget, and the rest of the legislature is forced to vote on that budget. That's a bad way to appropriate taxpayer dollars. As governor, in a Governor Lamb administration, we'll keep a 4-month session, but the first month should be policy only, the last 3 months, budget only. And here's how we get to that question that you just asked me. In a 3-month budget session, now we're using all 149 legislators, because all 149 were elected by the people of Oklahoma, regardless if you're a freshman, sophomore, or a 11-year legislator, using the existing committee and subcommittee structure, holding unelected bureaucrats accountable on how they spent the taxpayer money. So here's how the exercise works. The first week of the budget session, you ask an agency or department. On a Thursday, a legislator asks, what service do you provide Oklahoma? And that department says, well, we provide X, Y, or Z service. And now that legislator can learn for the first time, well, today's Thursday, and on Monday of this week, we had a different department testifying before this committee, and they said the exact same thing, that they're providing X, Y, and Z service to the people of Oklahoma. So now the legislature can learn and say, why are we duplicating services? We also get to zero-based budgeting. So we've talked about consolidating of departments in Oklahoma before, or agencies in Oklahoma, but there's never been a vehicle to get there. Now, my process of a 3-month budget session, you can finally get to some of these agencies and departments all across Oklahoma and say, are you duplicating services?
You have mentioned numerous times that we have visited your ability or your desire to visit all 77 counties in Oklahoma. Sure. In so doing, you're able to see the fabric of Oklahoma, to understand the character, the work ethic from Kime to Hugo to big city of Hollis, all the way up to Miami and every part in between. And so you understand Oklahoma's character and moral fabric, if you will. So the question is, as governor, what moral fiber or what character would you be bringing to this office, administration?
Yeah, well, I was raised in Enid, Oklahoma. That says something about how somebody's raised and what they're like. You know, people in Enid and those surrounding communities around Enid that watch this program, you know what you get with Todd Lamb, because you helped raise me. These men and women around here helped raise me. Norman and Belva Lamb lost my dad in January. Norman and Belva Lamb raised me. I was raised in a godly home. Mom and Dad took me to 2505 West Garriott. That's the address of Emmanuel Baptist Church. I've got a biblical worldview, and we talk about the Oklahoma Standard quite a bit here. That's neighbor helping neighbor, doing to others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. So any public policy that I would examine or consider as governor, it's through the lens of a biblical worldview, loving your neighbor, and doing what's best for the people of Oklahoma.
The Department of Transportation Commissioner or Director, Mike Patterson, came to Enid here recently and was discussing the overall state need to improve bridges, repair bridges, and the laundry list really extended. As governor in your administration, what would you do to, say, complement that effort? How can we keep our roads and bridges and highways safe in Oklahoma?
Now, you could ask some candidates this question, and they'll give you some platitude like, well, you got to invest in infrastructure. You got to build better roads and bridges. You have to make sure that something is funded. Those are generalities. You got to have specific details. I'll get specific with you on this. It's time that the state of Oklahoma appropriately and fully funds the Department of Transportation of the baseline funding, this is key and this is specific, of $775 million. That's the requirement the Department of Transportation is supposed to have to help move forward on the 8-year plan. The 8-year plan has been successful in Oklahoma. It has significantly reduced the structurally deficient roads and bridges that are state-owned in Oklahoma. We've made a lot of headway, again, because of detailed planning, specific planning, but year after year, the legislature passes a special statute that says, well, this is the year we're not going to fully fund the Department of Transportation at the baseline of $775 million, which it should be. In a Governor Lamb administration, the baseline funding for Department of Transportation will be $775 million because roads and bridges, it's a core function of government, and it's one of those public policy issues that touches everything else. Going to school, you want your kids on that school bus or driving them yourself on a safe road or bridge. You can't get to good health care without roads or bridges. Companies won't reinvest in your communities without good roads and bridges. So it's one of those all-encompassing issues that I'll take very seriously. I was proven when I did that in the state Senate, and I understand the baseline of $775 million.
Thank you for joining us today. Our program entitled Ask the Candidate. Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb is joining us today discussing his platform, if you will, in regard to the governor's race, and we just appreciate you joining us today. Todd, one of the topics that people are still trying to understand and investigate is this medical marijuana stuff. And forgive me for the word stuff, but I just don't have the right word. Medical marijuana issue, maybe I should say. So, what are your views then? I'll just leave it pretty open-ended. But what are your views on this medical marijuana issue?
Well, I've been very direct, very upfront. Some folks want to equivocate and talk about the issue. I think you want to know, viewers want to know how I'm voting on that state question. I'll be very direct and candid. I'm voting no on the state question. Now, the issue of medical marijuana, that's a discussion that needs to happen. And that needs to be a discussion at the state level of how to truly allow medicinal marijuana for men and women and kids, whatever the age is, when doctors need to prescribe that to abate a serious medical issue or medical pain. However, the reason I'm voting no on the state question is because it's not medicinal marijuana. If you look at the language of the state question, as it is written, as it will be asked on the ballot, marijuana could be too widely grown as a crop, too easily prescribed by an individual, and therefore too easily abused by other individuals. So it's asking a question, or it's really the wrong answer to a question that needs to be asked on medicinal marijuana. The state question would much more allow recreational and therefore abuse of marijuana than truly being medicinal marijuana.
Let's move back to the topic of economic development. There was a national story recently about a challenge in Texas of an Air Force base having some infringement upon their property, their flightway, if you will, or their flight pattern with wind energy. And it was this two powers, if you will, just kind of butting heads on this. Oklahoma as an energy state, and yes, we continue, especially here in northwest Oklahoma, north central Oklahoma, there's a wind farm every week, it seems like. As governor, what would be your plan, if you will, in making sure we all get along? We need the Air Force bases. We need military support here in the state. We are a military state. but we also are interested in wind energy and also economic development. How do you get those two to work together under your administration?
Well, Oklahoma has a couple of things we need to realize. One, this is breaking news on your program. Oklahoma has wind. Breaking news. Heard it here first. All right. So Oklahoma has wind. Oklahoma has Tinker Air Force Base, Altus Air Force Base, and my hometown has Vance Air Force Base. Other military installations, yes, but we're talking about Air Force bases. So that's significant, and they must work together comprehensively, bringing both sides together. Because whether it's the wind industry, they certainly want to make sure that the homeland's protected, and the men and women that serve our military and sign up and serve in that capacity are well trained. So it's got to be a team approach and a comprehensive approach. I think that's why it's important the next governor of Oklahoma should be somebody that understands industry, but also understands the importance of our military installations. First and foremost, it's to train men and women who have joined the military to protect and defend our liberties and our freedoms. Paramount. That's number one issue. But you also have to understand there are serious economic engines. These military installations all across Oklahoma are benefited the community, but also beneficial to the state of Oklahoma. And both sides must come together and work together.
Lieutenant Governor Lamb, this next topic or the next question is very near and dear to folks here in Enid. We've undertaken this project to obtain water from Call Lake, 70 plus miles of a pipeline from Call Lake, east of Ponca City, all the way to Enid, Oklahoma. And several $100 million project. We have an understanding that, and people sometimes forget about this in western Oklahoma, that our water is derived from wells. We don't have a big Grand Lake or a keystone to draw from. We just have these wells. And so to ensure growth and water as the new gold here in northwestern Oklahoma, we need the Call Lake pipeline, but it's extremely expensive. Is there a role, as governor, would you determine if there's a role or not to assist Enid or other communities with water pipeline projects? If Enid needed an extra $1 million, could they come to the state for that under your administration?
Well, before we get to the hypothetical of if Enid or any community needs X amount of dollars, before we deal in hypotheticals, which is always very, very dangerous to do, the role of the state of Oklahoma, one, should be to develop a statewide comprehensive water plan. Now, somebody might be viewing this right now and thinking, well, I thought I heard about a statewide water plan that was released 7 or 8 years ago. Well, I read that, and my view is that that was a comprehensive statewide water study. I would humbly submit that we do not have a statewide water plan. So it's important, though, I think the state's role, very important to develop a statewide water plan for Oklahoma. Again, it's about detailed planning and comprehensive planning. First, I think it's to let the communities work out what's beneficial to communities before states come in and start mandating what communities do. Again, a comprehensive approach, but you must have a long-term, not a study, but a long-term plan, because we know in Oklahoma our weather patterns are very cyclic. Nino, the drought conditions, very, very rainy spring about 3 years ago. So our weather patterns are very unpredictable. And when it's a drought, it hurts our farms, it hurts our ranches. We have to make sure that you're not depleting a reservoir somewhere that puts another community in jeopardy, but take the consideration of needs of communities and citizens in those communities.
Lieutenant Governor Lamb, there was a phrase that was very popular during this past legislative session, Step Up Oklahoma. Kind of consisted of various business leaders offering their suggestions to the legislature on addressing business education topics of this nature. Your comments or your views of Step Up Oklahoma?
Well, that's a little bit maybe extremely past tense now. I understand why you're asking it. Step Up Oklahoma really highlighted frustration of not just the business men and women that were part of the Step Up initiative or the Step Up plans. It personified and really represented the frustration of our citizens all across Oklahoma for those at the state capitol, i.e. the legislature specifically, to have a plan. You've got to have a plan. I keep talking about this because my campaign for governor is about detailed planning specifics, not just a platitude of it's bad, it's got to get better. How does it get better? What are the detailed plans? How do you fix education? How do you diversify Oklahoma's economy? How do you restructure the budget? You've got to have detailed planning to do it. So, without getting into every detail of Step Up, because really it is past tense, there's one reform. I didn't like any of the tax increases in Step Up. I'm anti-tax increase because there's plenty of money that I can quantify. It's not a platitude. There's plenty of money I can quantify at the state capitol or the Oklahoma Tax Commission that needs to be examined, and there's money there right now. So one reform that I liked in Step Up was the reform of the governor and lieutenant governor running on a ticket. It's long overdue. After serving as lieutenant governor of Oklahoma, it's been an honor to serve in this capacity. However, moving forward, the citizens of Oklahoma will be served much better when the governor and lieutenant governor run on one ticket.
Well, we reached the time in our program where no more questions.
That's it.
We went through
already?
all of that.
They went fast. They went really fast.
And now we just give the candidate an opportunity to speak, as I say, to the folks. So
Okay.
speak to the folks here in Oklahoma. And one of these lights are going to come on, and here's your opportunity to speak from your heart.
Okay. I want to thank my friend Steve again for allowing me to be on this network and to visit with him about the future of Oklahoma. Ladies and gentlemen, most of you know me, some of you may not. You certainly probably know my mom, Belva Lamb, who raised me, my late father, Norman Lamb, who raised me. Born and raised in Enid, Oklahoma. Those are my roots. I think that says a lot about me as a person. Many of you watching this today helped raise me, and I appreciate that sincerely. With Todd Lamb, you know what you get. I'm a proven conservative. I've worked hard on behalf of the people of Oklahoma, and I have a real detailed plan, an action plan to renew our state, how to restructure our budget, how to invest in education by getting more money in the classroom, additional rigor so our kids are prepared when they go to college. You can look at our plan at votetoddlamb.com. It's time we focus on renewing and reforming Oklahoma. I ask for your vote, June 26. I ask for your prayers between now and June 26. Thank you very much.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you for visiting ETN today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. And thank you again for joining us here on Ask the Candidate, our special guest, Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb. So keep that in mind of the primary coming up. Everybody get out and vote. This is Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Thank you for joining us on Ask the Candidate, and I look forward to visiting with you in the near future. Until then, make it a great day.